This is Mike Stern.
And this is Tom Hershenson.
Welcome to General Magic and the Soul of Tech.
We believed we were building something that would change the world, and in some ways we did. In others, we didn't understand what we were setting in motion. The story of General Magic isn't over. We're still living inside what it started.
Our special guest today is Kris Rodriguez, who was one of the original HR people at General Magic and who helped to build the team there.
It's great to have you, Kris, on the show. You have a unique perspective because you were one of the people who played, in my estimation, one of the most important parts at the company. You were a gatekeeper. You were at the front lines of deciding who got to be on the island and who didn't get to set foot on the island. And you've had a tremendous career since then with a lot of insight about all kinds of important aspects of individuals' career trajectories and how they experience work and how organizations contend with the challenge of talent and workforce. But before we get into your more recent career, what do you remember of your job of General Magic? What to you was kind of the core of that work, the most important thing that you were doing as part of that team?
Great question. And first of all, thank you for having me. It's great to connect with old friends and reminisce, but also kind of reminisce to think about kind of what's ahead. So thanks for taking me back there so many years ago. You know, honestly, the first thing that comes to my mind was I was a baby, I do want to say, because I think I'm still 26. And, you know, it was one of my first careers. I actually worked for a major computer company before General Magic, if anyone remembers Digital Equipment Corporation, that little company. But yeah, I mean, gosh, coming to Magic, it was like a graduate school experience, I would say, is what comes to my mind. Maybe even better with the power of the creativity that existed in that company, just walking in the door, right? You saw it. And the weight of that responsibility to maintain that kind of unique culture coming in was felt right away. And I felt very lucky and to be a part of that team, in some ways not worthy to be a part of that community. And so, yeah, I think gatekeeper, is that the word that you used, Tom? That's a good way of describing it, right? How do you maintain this level of connection of the people, the creativity, the space for creativity, the space for trying and failing and redoing. And, you know, as the cobwebs are coming out, I do remember saying no to people. And I do remember having hard conversations with hiring managers about decisions where, you know, we wanted the best people and that were really going to serve the community. And yeah, that was definitely an important aspect and element of my job, for sure.
What did the best mean back then? I mean, what were you selecting for? And why did people not make it through the gate?
Yeah. You know, the word that comes to my mind is not in any particular order, but integrity was the first one that came to my mind. Enthusiasm is the other word that came to my mind. And a bit of, maybe this is similar, but like this wantingness to play, to be in a space of, play, which probably encouraged, right, the enthusiasm and the creation. And just really people that were just gifted in their craft was at the end of the day, we were hiring, you know, folks that knew what they were doing. This wasn't a training ground. Well, maybe for some that went on to do very well, but coming in with real standalone rigor of their own, for sure.
One of the things that's striking to me about what you just said is the concept of play.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's the cliche that if work is fun, then it isn't work. But there really is something, and I hate to use the word, but I will, magical about being in a work environment where it doesn't seem arduous, or it feels arduous. There's also a sense of, and here I'm reaching for words because what defines the human experience of play, but there's some sort of fun and there's some sort of sense of, delight is just around the corner and you keep striving for that. How long do you feel like it took for you when you arrived at General Magic for it to click with you? Okay, here's the culture. Here's what they're looking for. These are the kind of things that are going to differentiate between someone who perhaps is really excellent at their craft, but they're just not quite the right fit versus somebody else who has that same excellence, but is the right fit. Was that something you picked up immediately? Was a period of acclimation? How did you figure out that kind of indescribable criteria that was so important in making decisions?
I mean, I think I honestly, it's something that you felt walking in the door. Now, we're N of two at this stage of my career, right? Like big monster organization, global 300,000 people, to a General Magic. But even still, I knew it was unique and different walking in. And so how did I know that? It was the words that were used to me to describe the culture. It was when you walk in the door and you see, the logo, right, of General Magic, right? What is this? What's happening here? What's the message that's being conveyed to me in this imagery, right? I knew a couple of the people that worked at General Magic. So knowing them and their enthusiasm and hearing why they thought it was so special, and probably the questions they asked me, and I wish I remembered, but I felt like the interview process was maybe like none other.
I was
that
going
I
to ask how you got hired, right? I was going to ask, what was your experience like when you got hired?
Well, I'll tell you what, I sometimes these things are indescribable, right? It's like the gut, the heart, right? The soul connection. And, there's someone better to tell this story. But the person who hired me, Sandra Card and I had worked together before at DEC, and she was a recruiter there. We had lost touch, and I had identified this opportunity and called her. And she tells the story of, on her end, immediately hanging up and saying to Steve Hands, "Oh my gosh, I have found the person for this job." And she tells that story. And it's not, to toot my horn, but in hearing her tell that story, I'm like, oh, wow, what was it about me, that she saw in me? And by this time, General Magic was kind of all over the San Jose Mercury news, right? And so that the way she talked about and she did a lot of that in her hiring, right? When she identified someone, she just knew it. And so there's something indescribable here, I think, is what I'm coming to. I don't know if I have more words
No,
to
I
describe what
think
it was like meeting those people.
Well, part of what I hear you saying is that intuition is involved and things go, I thought you put it so well, that there are things you can't describe in words.
Mm-hmm.
And people have a feeling, something just clicks. They know in their heart, in their soul, that something feels right. So I think in an age of everything being digital, it's a refreshing take, but it's also a reminder that there's something that hopefully resonates with us in certain situations, and to follow that feeling, to trust that feeling. The other thing that occurs to me is that you were attuned to all these things. I mean, there's no guarantee that a candidate walks through the door and notices the logo and thinks deeply about what it reflects and what it embodies and what it has to say about that organization. And my sense is, and you'll tell me whether I'm right or wrong, that a through line of your career has been that ability to see beyond what's in front of a person, to kind of get get beneath the surface and understand the larger context of a situation. Am I right that do you see that as something that has again and again been central to how your career's unfolded, or am I way off in left field?
I mean, that's the only way I know how to operate. It's really getting to the heart. I mean, this is the heart of my coaching practice, is really helping leaders, leadership teams really come to their own humanity, right? It starts within them. I think we've been doing a whole lot of unwinding over the many decades before, in the last 20 years, unwinding of some old school superficial leadership presence and ways of being. And to me, my practice is all about the where are you in this, and it's not the cliche of bring your whole self to work. I I just don't know how you truly separate. There's no door you walk through, figuratively or otherwise, anymore. We are who we are, and how do we bring out those the nuances of each of us into like how we lead and how we show up and work. So the crux of my business is helping to get at the heart of the human element of it. Interesting question to say, how much was my experience at Magic impacted, right, by how I think about work, how I think about leadership? Imagine a world where I stayed at a digital equipment corporation, right? Like, and that was the model, for which, that was very traditional leadership development back in that day. What is my, hopefully would have come to this on my own, but yeah, talk about like impact, influence, and I haven't really thought about it. Yeah, I wonder how much Dark Magic did play a role for me and how I think about humans in the connection in the work. Yeah, good question.
Were there leaders at Magic who really stood out as doing it the way you thought they should do it?
Gosh. Yeah, okay, now you're really making me go back 30 years to the leadership team that was there. I mean, sitting around, I'm sorry, we're having a meeting and we're all sitting on the ground and crisscross applesauce while we're getting just real talk. Yeah, all of those engineering leaders, that's what they did. Right? It was about what we were doing, about what needed to be done, but they were in the mix with everyone, right? Cube to cube to cube to cube, night to night to night to night. So yeah, there were leaders that modeled that for me, for sure. Yeah, 100%.
What was it like? We shipped in late 94, went public in early 95. 6 months later, kind of the bottom had fallen out. What was that experience like? How did you deal with it? How did you help people deal with it? Because you stayed through the pivot to Portico and the natural language based business, which also was too early, and eventually didn't make it.
But here we are.
What was it like? And again, how did that inform the way you teach in counsel? In counsel now.
Yeah. I think good question. It was a heartbreak, I will say, right? It was a heartbreak to start with the, and it was a complexity of things, but to not see it happen the way we envisioned it was the heartbreak. And then to see people move on, right, was the next level heartbreak from that. Valiant efforts to turn the company around and shift assets and move into new spaces. But that was a shift in culture. That was a shift in leadership. That was a shift in mission. That was a shift in, that culture left with it. And how did I help people through it? Through that transition, a lot of our friends went on to do some cool things, like not too far after that, maybe not as big as some of the things are now, but, did go on pretty quickly to do new things. So you knew that was possible. And, so so I'm thinking about the last part of your question, how's that shaped me going forward? Now I have to tell you, that has been the cycle that I have experienced being in the Silicon Valley my whole career. And, maybe it was the nature of the time, right? Because if you think about General Magic, not kind of going where we wanted, and you think, guess what? The internet's going like gangbusters, right? And that's the new kind of wave, that's coming through. So there's always a next thing, right? And then there was a bust there, right? That went down. Just so happens in my career at that time, I pivoted industries for a variety of reasons. But I've been working in biotech with biotech firms the last 25 years or so, 25 years. And so, Genentech was my first client. So here we go. Launch, life-saving drugs and technology. And, the biotech field, the last 5 years or so has kind of gone through its own, shifting. And so what I know and what I've experienced in my career is things change. We have a lot of hype, and then we have a lot of reality, and then things live on, and then new things come up at the same time. And so I feel like that has been, juxtaposed to my dad's career, defense contractor, Northrop Grumman, 40 years, stamped and done. And that is not the world I've ever experienced in my career.
So are you facing, because now, the way AI is penetrating the corporate world, new tools, new workflows, and all the rest. You've got to see massive anxiety and fear on people's part. Again, given what you just said about, people went on, things changed, people got, went on and learned how to do new things. How does, again, what do you tell people now about how that's going to affect them?
Yeah. So I know you have some thoughts on this, so I want to hear about them too. But I heard this quote and I repeat it all the time, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this as well. And it's that Amara's law, right? Like we tend to underestimate or overestimate the impact of technology in the short term and underestimate its impact in the long term. And I just keep thinking about that because I wonder where we are in that timeline, right? And, are we at that beginning where we're like raising the flags now, of the potential rewards and the potential risks, which I love. We're having those conversations. But I just do wonder the things we're even thinking about now, what's the reality look like decades from now? Like, can we even fathom, what that looks like in reality? The things we're concerned about now, what's the thing we're not thinking about? So I also will say that, I'm in a world where I'm reading all the risks, right? I'm reading all the same articles, and, I have young people in my life that, have very, specific concerns about, the environment, and, they're being scared into, certain concerns. But I also live in a world where I can see the benefits of this technology when it comes to certainly on the medical field, right? When I look at what's possible in the acceleration and the development of life-saving, drugs. So, it's I think with all of these technologies, right? There are going to be pros and cons, and there's going to be bad actors. And so this is why I said yes to this conversation. You guys are thinking about and starting that conversation about what are the guardrails we need to be thinking about that we can possibly conceive of now. So I don't know if I answered your question, Mike. What what do I tell people? It depends where you're living. I will give you one short little story. Recently befriended someone who is very young in their career, They got scooped up, graduated from a well-known, well-respected university, got swooped up into San Francisco, into the AI world, and she's in it. This is her field now. And I had lunch with her last week, and what she reminded me of was the bubble that we are in of this Silicon Valley space, and how most of the world is not really aware of what's happening with AI or the potential for AI. The day to day out beyond the bubbles that we are in, that we live in, really don't know, what's coming or how to use it or how to engage with it. It's just not even in the masses of the world at this point. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I think that's a great point. I mean, there is this idea of people's awareness and consciousness. And I certainly remember that from back in the day at General Magic, where we had such a clear sense of the vision that we were trying to bring to life. But, drive 200 miles away from Silicon Valley and, in Central Valley, California, no one was concerned with, anywhere, anytime communication. And if you had showed them a prototype of what we were working on, I think you'd get, puzzled looks as opposed to any sort of understanding or enthusiasm about it. And to me, it's very similar to Washington, D.C., where people are very involved in the intricacies of political dynamics and policy debates. And from my work on national political campaigns, you get out beyond the beltway, as they say, and just those details of the political fights and the policy disagreements, just people aren't thinking about that. They're living their lives. They have important concerns that many times are not reflected in the conversations within that political class. And I think it's a similar thing with the Silicon Valley bubble. It's so exciting to be in that, and it's so much going on, and there's so much to know. But, news does not travel fast, and it's not on people's radars, or if it is, and only a very fragmented and intermittent.
Yeah, and likely they're seeing the headlines, but their day-to-day work, right? Like the small manufacturers, right? And in the different parts of our country, they're likely they're not going to be investing in AI technology anytime soon because of the capital, required for that kind of infrastructure. I'm not saying it won't happen at some point, but the average worker in that way is not going to be impacted in their day-to-day experience for some time. Having said that, I don't know if you saw, I saw this in the New York Times this morning. Did you see they were talking about actually my neighbor? So Christopher Olah is, I guess he was invited by Pope Leo.
Right.
Did you read that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, having said all of that, interesting, the Vatican is taking notice and has some things to say. So, really polar different experiences. It is making kind of these political and apparently religious circle conversations, and certainly in Silicon Valley. But I do think, yeah, we have to remember it's really not affecting a lot of people in terms of their day to day at this point. Can I ask you a question? I was curious if what you thought about why the Pope might be entering the conversation. I don't know if either of you had read about it.
Yeah, well, I think the encyclical kind of summarized his attempt to pivot the church toward a more social consciousness and more awareness of the potential bad impacts of innovation on people's ordinary lives, and the need, given the massive misallocation of capital right now into AI, to look toward what's the things you're talking about. What are its potential effects on people's everyday lives? What can be done now to mitigate the downside, to provide safety nets, to look to human-centered innovation, and to socialize, to spread the benefits of AI rather than keep them all concentrated in the hands of, 5,000 people in San Francisco. So, I mean, but I think it was kind of a major policy statement on his where he thinks the church ought to be going in terms of social awareness, and more than AI itself, but kind of repositioning the church on the side of ordinary people, against the and the billionaires. And it was interesting that he had one of the OpenAI founders there. I mean, it's and people are kind of disagreeing about what that actually meant. But I was I know Tom, I wanted to give Tom a chance for another question. But did you pivot into biotech because you were disillusioned by the magic experience and kind of your faith in technology improving people's lives? You kind of lost that, and that biotech seemed like a better place to find that?
Go that far at all, but I would say that there's something that really spoke to me, right, about that mission. But I think it would be true to say I think the timing was also right, because it was the dot-com bust, and in terms of I was starting to fly my own flag of a consulting practice, and really that's where there was big investment being made in that space. And I will say that I'm a Silicon girl, so at the heart, right? Like I'm a local girl, stayed local. So technology is still something that I pay attention to. I certainly still do have tech clients, but I think that is the common thread with magic. Actually, was a really strong vision, right? I mean, it's easy to talk about. It's easy to name it, when you're working in biotechnology. But I think magic had a really strong vision, different kind of vision, but just as powerful. So I think the segment doesn't matter as much as the meaning behind the mission.
Yeah, that gets to a couple points. I mean, first of all, to give my answer to your question, this is not new for the Catholic Church to be concerned about the moral and ethical implications of technologies. I will have to go back and look to pin down whether there was, a specific statement, but certainly I remember the U.S. Conference of Bishops and it wrestling with the question of nuclear weapons, for example, which is another kind of innovation. So this is not new terrain for them by any measure. I think that it speaks to the issue oft overlooked, if not completely ignored within the value, that innovation, design considerations in innovations are moral and ethical choices. And that's the bottom line. I don't read a lot about or hear a lot about venture capitalists or entrepreneurs talking about the moral and ethical dimensions of their work. And I think the Pope and the Catholic Church is drawing attention to that in an extremely, I don't want to just say appropriate way, but a crucial and vital way. That, that old Howard Zinn line about you can't be neutral on a moving train. And in the same way, these technologies are unfolding. There are decisions that a small group of people are making and that many people are not being consulted on or involved in the decision making that are going to have profound effects for countless numbers of people. And to your point, Kris, tremendous effects, but effects that occur so slowly over time that we don't perceive in the moment the direction in which things are headed. So I don't want to say heartened, but I was maybe relieved is the right word, or had a good feeling about the Pope issuing a thoughtful, reasoned, powerful, and much needed take on the revolution that's afoot now. You kind of, just to shift gears, 2 points occur to me. First of all, you said that the biotech industry, spoke to you. And it's always funny to me when people use that phrase because if you're deaf, it doesn't matter who's speaking to you. I mean, not only did it speak to you, but, it resonated with you. You had an experience of connecting with that. And you've kind of answered this already, but it seems to me that another through line in your career, and maybe it was you developed an allergy while you were at DEC. But you, from Magic On, have always been engaged in work that matters to you, that resonates with you, that speaks to you. And what I wonder is the leaders and the organizations who have the good fortune to have you as a consultant, what don't they understand when you come in? What are the key things that they just aren't on their radar, that they don't grasp around leadership and the human experience and what that human component needs to do or be for an organization to do as well as possible? Are there kind of a list of things that through General Magic and your experience in biotech, you walk into the room and you're pretty sure that people aren't going to grasp X, Y, and Z, and you're going to be the one to open their eyes to it?
Well, leaders come in all forms and their own evolution, right? And I meet them all on the different many different paths, right? And it's really fun to work with a leader that is already in an enlightened state of their own leadership, right? Because then we're teaming together to bring that vision, right, to other leaders. And the others, which we'll call them, I think the story is, the place I start is, we talked about this a little bit before, but this place I start is within them. What is it? Why do they want to lead? What is their vision? What inspires them? What is, we talked about mission and purpose. Like, what is your mission and purpose as a leader? And we always start there, because I think when I'm dispelling in that is the textbook. What do I need to do? Give me the instruction manual of how I lead, right? And that's a lot of, I think, decades ago, we handed you literally instruction manuals, right? And on how to lead, and here are the steps, and here's the thing, and here's how you give feedback, and here's how you, project yourself, and here's how you own a room. And, those things maybe have a place in time, but I'm dispelling the textbook of leadership and really helping them to connect to, like, why does this matter to you? Why does it matter to work in drug development? What drew you, to drug development? What drew you, developing, a handheld device? Like, what is it about that? Why are you passionate about that? What do you envision that's possible because of this? And it's helping people connect there first, because if they don't have it, or if they don't know it, then you're just reading lines, right? And that doesn't resonate for people. It doesn't come
Are
through.
most of them focused these days? It's about money and power, right? It's. I mean, that's kind of the sense you get from the Brolyarchy, right? That the AI arms race is focused on at the Altman trial, at the OpenAI, the Musk versus Altman trial. The emails that came out were about how do I become a billionaire is Brockman's question. That was his vision, right? Was about becoming a billionaire. I mean, is that what you hear when you question people about why they're doing what they're doing, or is it better than that?
Mike, I will say those are not the people I work with.
Okay.
They're not calling me, right? Those people have their own belief system and about what they are doing, right? So they're not calling me for enlightenment into their leadership. And I tell you what, it is funny, but it's so frustrating, because I've been out of grad school, whatever number of years, and we still have a book club that we formed postgraduate school. A couple of us still would say, okay, we're going to keep reading all the books. And it's kind of taken on a life of itself, and we still read OD books. And I just get so frustrated, because I'm like, but these guys aren't doing any of this. What the heck? right? And we can name them, the top 5, the top 10. The list is definitely longer than that, but it's it's that small group that don't behave the way, the way that we know really pulls people and delivers people. Yeah.
There's the notion that people will claim their motives are one thing, but when you dig deep, you find out it's something else. And I wonder, do you encounter people who do proclaim a pecuniary motive? I want us to go public and I'll have a ton of money and my life will be comfortable. And you dig deeper and you find out that if they really think about it, that's not what they're after. They're after a deeper source or a different source of meaning. Does that happen? Or is that, am I waxing poetic about a unit?
Say, I mean, I've not heard that quote come out of any of my clients about the, just want to make money. And those people exist. I mean, the closest I get to that is the CEO that is under tremendous pressure to deliver. Right. So they may not be translating it in words for like their own benefit, their own pocket, but the drive and the drive they are exhibiting, right? And that maybe the demands they're seeking, right? The push they have is, when you go public, as forget about it. Like the pressure, like that is the expectation that is what you're delivering back to shareholders, right? So that's how I see it manifest. It's this system that we have when you make public, when you capture public money, at the end of the day, we're probably all invested in those same markets that we're frustrated with, right? For our retirement benefits. So I'm happy for that pressure, right? In a way. But it's also important to have these kinds of conversations, right? Where we're trying to hold people account.
Well, the kind of, I hope it's not mythology, but, the culture of magic, when you were interviewing people for jobs, it was about their intensity and their passion and their commitment to trying to achieve the company's vision of, of access to everything and, everywhere, every time communication. It was going to make our lives better and all that. And they weren't focused on salary and they weren't focused on options. Is that a little bit too over-romanticized, or was that really true? You can tell by your expression that it's a little over-romanticized, maybe.
I mean, look, Maslow's hierarchy still exists, okay? Like, we weren't underpaying people either, Mike. Let's be clear about that. We were paying
We're
a
doing
good,
it for free.
but with that being an equal playing field, right? The compensation aside, being an equal playing field. Gosh, yes, it was about the mission. It was about the work. It was General Magic had a life of its own, in terms of what people understood, not only what you were doing, but what it was like to work there. And I think I was saying this to Tamara in our prep. I think it's the thing I've been trying to get back to for 30 years. And I hadn't really I hadn't really thought about it until, we started chatting, and certainly when we get together occasionally for our reunions, it's the thing that I've been trying to get back to.
I mean, if I were in a certain kind of church, I would stand up and yell, preach it. That is exactly the way I feel. And I remember when I was there, Jane Anderson said, this job's going to ruin you because you'll never work at a place that has this many talented people who are so united in trying to do something beyond just themselves. You'll never see this again. And I was too young to appreciate the wisdom of what she was saying, but it's really been true. I mean, I've had a lot of jobs and not many of them do we have reunions and keep in touch. And when I see somebody who I haven't seen for years from the company, we pick up where we left off. I mean, Magic was truly unique in that way. And I think that was part of why it was such a powerful experience, not just because of the technological revolution that we lit the fuse on, but, it's a preposterous analogy, but, I've heard about people who've served in combat or first responders who've responded to terrible natural disasters or calamities. And this feeling of shared sacrifice, we didn't really have shared peril in the same way that those types of people do, but that you're doing something that is, the cliched phrase, greater than yourself, that you're really trying to usher in something for the good of people far beyond the company. And we really bought into that. And I've never experienced that since. But one thing Mike and I have kicked around is whether there was a kind of a hubris, naive optimism that our enthusiasm for the vision. I mean, I don't think anybody at General Magic had to think that much about trying to get in touch with their vision. That was part and parcel of the deal. But did that blind us to thinking hard about the potential perils of what we were trying to usher in? I mean, is vision a double-edged sword, I guess, is my question to you. Do you find people who their vision animates them and helps them be great leaders, but it also creates blind spots? Is that something that you see or that you have thoughts about?
Wow, what a great question. I think it definitely can create blind spots in a way by design, right? Because the work you're trying to do in your stated vision is unbelievably hard and likely, just full of the landmines and shouldn't be that easy to achieve, nearly impossible to get to. And so in a way, the most compelling vision is going to blind you to those things.
That's such an excellent point. I've never thought of it that way, but it's so, you're trying to scale a vertical ice wall and there's no time for doubt. There's no time for second guessing. There's no time for maybe we can't do this. You really have to go full force or else there's no way you're going to surmount that.
Yeah.
So that's thanks for that way of putting it. That really,
I mean, that's definitely my advice. Now, can I answer the other side of that question? That says then also, look, in the business world, let's also have a conversation to manage, the potential risks, that might come our way, right? It's not the maybe on stage story or the recruitment story, right? Or the team event story, but certainly don't go blind to it. And I think that's the message that you've been telling with the story of General Magic, right? Like, hey, listen to all sides, anticipate, look ahead, look aside, look behind you, look in places sides you didn't know you had. And that's also, I think, what a successful business should be doing. So I don't want to say blindly follow the vision. You're not going to blindly walk up Everest, right? You are going to hold that vision like nobody's business, but you're going to plan and you're going to prepare and you're going to think about the potential risks. Yeah. And figure out how to navigate around them. So let me balance out my answer with that from a business perspective, for sure.
That leads me to an off-the-wall question, which is how much of your work involves helping people understand the concept of saying no, or the concept of setting something aside, or something not just isn't worth doing, but that it doesn't align with who they are. Is that a component of it?
Boy, people don't like to say no to things. It's true. And especially when you've got really two good ideas, right? And how do you make those choices, right? When you've got two really good ideas. I mean, AI might be the example of that. We're like, wow, look at these great benefits. Wow, look at these, big concerns that we have. It's a polarity there. And what do you do? Is it all yes or is it all no? And the answer is it's probably somewhere in between. But, in a strictly kind of business context in my coaching practice, we talk about saying no a lot and practice different ways of thinking about saying no, but it comes down to making what we call trade-off decisions, right? And bringing forward not just the no, but the why not now, or why no now, and what are you saying yes to in service of knowing the loss of saying no to this now. And so trying to bring forward a full conversation around that to kind of paint the picture Like, here are the two choices or more. We're going to say yes here, understood that the trade-off of not doing this now is this. And I feel like when you have that full, and this is in a coaching context, but when you have that fuller conversation about what you're saying no to, it helps people understand those trade-off choices that you're making.
Yeah, I think that was sorely lacking. And again, we who are developing the book have talked about this, that in our enthusiasm, we didn't tap the brakes or press pause at any moment to try to sort through what our enthusiastic yes about what we were trying to bring to life was also a no to. And the simplest example is anywhere, anytime communication. And for many of us, there are many times we experience that as the bane of our existence. You know, when you get a chime that you have a new email from your boss, just as you're about to turn in for the evening, no one is delighted by that moment. And that was entirely foreseeable. I mean, I can remember very distinctly press briefings where Bill Atkinson, one of the co-founders, talked about this idea. He didn't use the term email, he used the term telecard, similar to what we now call a text message, falling out of the sky into your pocket. And he spoke about it in such delightful terms. And journalists, I can't even count the number of briefings I sat in where he talked about that, and they were captivated by that, and understandably so. None of them, certainly none of us within General Magic, said, "Oh my God, the last thing I want is something falling out of the sky landing in my pocket." So that's, you know, we were saying yes to something without even being aware of what we were saying no to. And that is a concern in
Yeah,
the
we were
age of
saying no to
AI.
we were saying no to privacy. We were saying no to boundaries. We were saying no to work-life balance. You know, we were saying no to all those things, which were the outcome of part of what we laid the foundation for, right? And that's even though we had no work-life balance
Yeah.
at Magic, right?
I mean,
So we kind of
That
took that
explains
one
it
for
all.
we kind of took that one for granted, but you know,
but I'm curious, like, it sounds like you had some thoughts of what could be, but likely they weren't to the extent that we now experience that constant communication, right? Like, it
well,
goes back to, I don't think we even knew how bad it could get.
no, we only thought about how it would make our lives better. We did not think about how it would make them worse. We really didn't. I mean, we saw it as something that was so enabling that would for everything from bringing the family closer together, you know, to friendships and community building and all the rest. We just didn't see it. Tom, I don't know if you disagree with that, but I don't remember sitting around talking about, you know, we're creating the possibility that there'll never be any escape from work. I mean, we never sat around and talked about that I can remember.
I don't remember us ever talking about that. I mean, I'm chuckling because it reminds me of a story. I mean, we think we saw everything that existed at the time as a source of frustration, that we were going to eliminate those frustrations.
Yeah.
For some
Which is you
reason,
couldn't get a hold of people. You know, when you needed to, you couldn't get a hold of people, or your kids couldn't get a hold of you, or blah, blah, blah.
there was this
what we saw.
latency. I mean,
Yeah.
I remember I was flying to the East Coast, a very good friend of mine. We were going to meet for dinner, and my flight was late. Midair, the flight was late. And either she was going to stay, we were going to meet at Grand Central, I think. Either she was going to stay there until I showed up, or, you know, it was going to be, okay, when I land, I'll try calling her, and maybe she'll be at home, maybe she won't. Who knows how this evening's going to unfold? My kids can't imagine it. They just can't. They have no understanding of that world. And it's great to be able to change your plans and, you know, I'm running late or whatever else, the moment things start to unfold. But I'm reminded somehow of a story. We had a phone system at General Magic. You may remember AT&T Merlin, and it was this voicemail system. And one of the options was you could, when you were listening to a message, when you were playing it back, you could press, I think it was 7 to speed up the playback of it. And I remember one of the guys in the evangelism group, Kim Orumchian, was looking mortified. And I said, "What happened?" He said, "I was on a conference call and the guy was talking. And I started tapping 7, you know, get to the goddamn point." So the reason that pops into my mind now is not just because to me it's a hilarious story, but that's technology reframing human expectations and behavior, right? Like not whenever, but often when I speak to someone who's from the deep South, they just have a slow cadence. And rather than being an impatient Yankee, it's just in the mix. It's just part of that experience, and that's okay. And I didn't give one thought, Mike, to how we were accelerating life, how we were creating intrusion after intrusion. Never occurred to me. It was unalloyed good. And, it really gets to that point, Kris, that you brought up of when you're saying yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And to make those choices explicit and obvious, and as you also mentioned, thought out. People really examine what a no means in terms of how it opens up yes to other stuff, or what a yes means in terms of the doors that shut. There are times in life where you cannot have it both ways.
And I think with this AI, I mean, it's not going away. That train is not stopping. And just having these conversations, it's interesting. As I was just kind of, reading some of the latest articles out there, I didn't realize how much some of the AI leaders are the ones saying we need guardrails. We need, I dare say, regulation, right? We need, I won't put words in their mouths, but they're out there first and forefront concerned
They
about
have
safety.
concerns. Yeah.
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 Which is
Well,
very interesting and scary to me as the creators that they're saying this. And I don't know what they're looking for, but yeah, what's your take on that?
Well, it reminds me when I was at General Magic, I had a kidney stone at 5:00 in the morning one day. I didn't know. I'd never had a kidney stone. I thought it was dying. And actually my boss, then Tracy Byers, now Tracy Byers, drove me to the ER. And it was, for people who've never had a kidney stone, the pain was unbearable. I mean, I couldn't understand how I hadn't passed out from the pain. And I had this moment of realization of, well, I understand why people with, horrible bone cancer or whatever want to die. Like, I'm not going to be able to take this. Once they got a line in me and gave me morphine, it turned into one of the top 3 days I've ever had in my life. It was so fantastic. And I had a pretty liberal attitude towards drug legalization going into that day. When I came out of it, I said, listen, there's no way they can make this stuff legal. like no one will do anything. Right. And to me, the teaching point is when you get up close to something, the kind of, not familiarity breeds contempt, but familiarity breeds caution. And when the guys whose financial futures rest on AI triumphing are sounding the alarm, you better take notice, because they have billions of reasons not to clue anybody in that could be some bad outcomes from this. So yeah, I think that it's really telling that they are, some of them are sounding the alarm quite loudly. And I think for some of them in a very sincere way, a very authentic way, not in a self-serving, calculated way. Some of them, I think, are more cynical, or there's a more Machiavellian approach to them sounding the alarm. But some of them, I think, they've seen up close, and it is disquieting to them what the technology
Yes.
would usher
Yes.
in.
I mean, just reading, and I'm not going to be able to quote him exactly. So Chris Olaf, who was the Anthropic co-founder he lives down the street here, and he had three things to say, and I'm not going to remember them all, but the third one he said, we are seeing things that are unnerving.
Yeah.
That's almost a quote of what he was saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like models that are, replication of like the neuroscience, of our own brains. That scares me more than anything I've been reading. The fact that and yet, it's like they're going on to continue kind of to develop these tools. And I think, okay, is this the strategy of enlisting the masses and helping to solve. I'm not sure I understand why being so forthright about the concerns that their own developers are making. But, it certainly then creates a space for more of us to have these conversations, right? Because I think this, that we've said yes to AI. And so now what do we need to be concerned about today? We can't probably anticipate future generations and things. Maybe we can try. And then I think about, you mentioned earlier, we have loads of other technologies that can decimate societies. And somehow we haven't done that. Knocking on my
Not
wood
yet.
Gosh, is this like that? Is this a nuclear bomb?
Oh, it's also fire, right? And, in other discussions we've talked about, you have building codes. You have codes against having open flames. You have, in the dry season, fire risk warnings. You have emergency response to fires. Now, sometimes there are catastrophic failures in that approach, and there are thousands upon thousands of Southern Californians who learn that lesson very bitterly. But the point is that there are things that are extremely risky, and we've figured out ways to try to mitigate those risks, prevent them, respond to them, etc. My concern is that twofold. First of all, that AI is so powerful and evolving so quickly that humans are unable to get our minds around what the risks are. And that second of all, various forces, various interest groups are uninclined to try to put up guardrails or have every reason to minimize the risk and, paint people as Luddites and naysayers, and that we're not going to get where not only do we not understand the risks, but even for the risk we understand, we're not going to get there fast enough to head them off at the pass. The things are going to spiral very quickly, and we're not going to act with as decisively and promptly as this technology requires. Other than that, we'll be fine.
I mean, so I got to ask, you guys have been thinking about this. Any places of traction that you're seeing or possibility, conversations starting to be had or support you're starting to see?
Yes. One of the interesting things that's happening in terms of resistance to data centers is that it crosses the political divide. In the heart of MAGA America, coalitions are forming of, people who voted for Trump 3 times and progressive Democrats to do something about the environmental and social impacts of data centers. There was a town in Missouri that Trump carried the county by 31 points, yet it's heartland MAGA. Yet the people, when they found out that the city council had done a secret deal to enable a data center in their backyard, they initiated a recall election. All of the city councilors were recalled. The mayor was recalled, and they were replaced with people who said no. I mean, that's just one of many kinds of things that could happen in terms of enlisting public resistance. But, I think we've learned from the oil companies and the tobacco companies that there's an awful lot of cynical lip service to guardrails. And I don't take any of the things that the AI leadership right now, including Anthropic, is saying. I see it as much more like oil company. When Chevron, was all for, reducing the use of fossil fuels. Yeah, right. I just don't buy it. And so I don't, we've got a long way to go and a lot to learn about how to do it. But there's some green shoots out there.
Yeah.
In my day job is for a company that part of what it does is technology, including AI, for large, sometimes smaller law firms, international law firms, and large national law firms, and legal departments, corporate legal departments. And there's tremendous discussion about how to use AI responsibly in those contexts. And there's acute consideration given to mitigating risk around the use of AI, various types of risks. There's a lot of anxiety about AI replacing lawyers, But once you get beyond that, there are a lot of leaders in organizations who don't see it as something that's going to put the whole department or the whole law firm out of work. Second of all, it's a reality that they have to deal with competitively and otherwise, operationally. And third, that they have duties. They have legal duties to shareholders. They have rules of professional responsibility and, really wrestling with questions about what is both safe, appropriate use of AI and legal use of AI. So, I think that there are people trying to get their arms around this, in a certain industry or a certain field, a legal field. But I think that that's pretty niche in terms of that. I mean, to your point, Kris, this idea that people live in the bubble and, in so-called flyover states that people aren't even aware. It's interesting. Mike's bringing up that, no, there are people aware of a certain aspect of AI. I mean, undeniably, AI is about large data centers and fantastic energy consumption. I mean, that's intrinsic to it, right?
Right.
So it's interesting, if somebody from the AI world says to people in this town of Missouri, no, you don't understand. It's this great technology. Well, the retort to that is, no, you don't understand. Yeah. You don't understand. This is, it's built on the backs of X, Y, and Z. And there's that disconnect in both directions. It seems like there's a disconnect. And that's part of the problem.
In your leadership coaching stuff, are you seeing people be explicit about ethical guidelines? That they want their businesses to be ethical. I mean, do you see? I guess your clients self-select to some extent, and that's why they come to you. But what kind of thing? What do they come to you for in terms of strengthening their ability to infuse that value into their organizations?
Yeah.
What works? What you don't have a playbook, but how do you make that happen?
Yeah. So, I mean, in ethics in particular, I mean, I think that I will just double down on what you said. There's definitely a bias here, right? In the viewpoint that I have, right? In my, who I'm working with. And by the way, coaching isn't good, a good turnaround tool, right? So if you've got some unethical and, uncouth behaviors, coaching is not the solution. That will not necessarily change those behaviors here. But gosh, that's all I want to work with is ethical. I think you asked me a question about magic and some of the qualities. And I think the first thing I said was integrity, right? Integrity. I mean, I want to deal with humans. I want to deal with humanity. And that, I'm mostly attracting that for sure. I think someone who shows up with a question or is presenting as questionable doesn't have either that self-awareness or the type of humanity and empathy that I want in my life and that I think others thrive in. So it isn't a real question that I have to interface with for the most part, to be honest. And they're probably not seeking, those people aren't seeking my advice. But it's a good question because, as I think about what will happen in the future, this dystopian world that we're going to get in our cars and drive to, I foresee, and I want to believe this, and by now I'm the glass half full gal, but I foresee more space for humanity. Like I foresee when things are done for us, right? Yes, I know my multiplication tables, but I still will ask Siri sometimes, especially if there's like 4 digits. So when things are doing, right, I'm not doing the long division. So when things are done for us, what does my life look like? And I hope that then enters more space for this, right? For these conversations, for discussions about ethics, the back and forth, of what it means to be ethical. Is there more space in the world for us to connect as humans and have these dialogues again? I mean, I want to be at the French cafes where we sit around all afternoon drinking coffee, smoking cigarettes. Just kidding, the cigarette part, but like philosophizing and like really, getting in touch and questioning these things that are happening in the world, whether they be politics or technology or medicine or ethics. And anyway, a long way to say, like, I just want to bring it back to that's what I hope for. And it will take people maybe being awakened because they're hurt.
Mm.
I mean,
Yeah, I'm
that's the
thinking,
example you gave, right? The data centers as an example.
but like in the life sciences and in biotech, so gene editing now is going to lead to the possibility of rich people buying genetically edited embryos, to give their children advantages, selecting for things like resistance to disease or cognitive improvements and things like that. I mean, are you seeing debates inside leadership, C-suites in biotech saying, people could, that could be an outcome of what we're doing. How do we
Yeah.
make the benefits more widely available
Yeah.
than that?
Yeah.
Are people talking about stuff like that?
Yeah. So, you're asking, a couple rungs down from the highest, the CEOs of the biggest pharma companies. And I will tell you, those people that I work with, pharma companies have the bad rap, right? And, the potential, the harmful impact of some of the technologies that are happening. My exposure is I'm with scientists and I'm with people that are passionate about the missions of these companies, and the people that are working in these companies that I interact with, right? These are like vice presidents, senior vice presidents. They're not the executive vice presidents and CEOs of Bayer, but even Bill Atkinson, the CEO of Bayer, like his focus is on curative, positive, patience, solving. Like I can say that because I know him. And those are the executives that I have met in the biotech space. And that's the message that they're saying. And I love talking to people that want to naysay the industry, because I can say I'm working in it for 25 years. The people that are doing this work are not in it. Look, there's always going to be bad actors. And that, like we got to watch out for bad actors here. But yeah, the experience that I'm having for them, and I think that we can say this for the masses. I'm going to believe we're all here for the good. And that has been the experience of the people that I've run in circles with.
We're about out of time for one of these. If you're going to kind of sum up the trajectory that you went, from being a young recruiter at General Magic, someone who's at the beginning of a career, and where you've ended up now, what are you happiest about in terms of what you've been able to accomplish in terms of helping to build organizations that think the way you've just described?
Mm. I often speak to leaders, this young leader that I met recently, and I asked her, who's her role model? What's your role model for leadership? She's COO of her 3-person startup. And she's wanting to learn, how do I think about this? How do I think about leading? And I said, well, who are the role models? Who is it that you aspire, that that speaks to you? And I will say that I had that, and she's going to go and search for that. She's not sure she has that. And I think that the experience at Magic taught me many things, but just having a model of what's possible and how we work together, and is the vision that I will keep trying to bring to life. So,
Tammy,
I respect people's choice of pronouns. I don't have a problem. But it's curious to me that people don't also proclaim their noun. And I don't know what my noun is. I mean, it might be that I'm a father. It might be that I'm a guy who desperately tries to be funny and continues to fail at that. I don't know what my noun is, but if you had to pick what your noun is, I mean, how do you conceive of who you are in that, in a holistic way, not just work-wise, professionally or personally, but is there, you gave a couple words about what you selected for at General Magic. What are a couple words that for someone meeting or listening to Kris Rodriguez for the first time, you'd want them to come away with?
Mm, yeah,
How do you order that
yeah,
hierarchy?
yeah,
You know,
yeah. The first word that came to my mind is human. And the second word that came to my mind was mom. I think maybe I'll just, it's maybe not one word, but just, caring, compassionate is something I try to be. I'm not like that in my every minute of my every life. Certainly not enter mom, with that as well, but or wife. But yeah, those are the words that come to
That's
my mind.
great. I want to start with a quick anecdote and then one more word or phrase for you. My best friend, I was confiding in my best friend that I lost my temper with my kids. This is several years ago. And he said, Hersh, it's so good for your kids to see you lose your shit. It's really important because then they know they can't fuck with you that much. So anyways, but I think you're an eye opener, Kris. I think you're somebody who brings people into a state of awareness about certain things. You guide people to more clarity about stuff. That I would add to the list of descriptors for you. So for what it's worth, I
Thank
think
you.
that's too.
Did you go to my website before we hopped on?
I
Thank you.
did, but I don't think I'm quoting from it, am I?
No, but that is the goal of a coach
Yeah.
is to help you see within yourself the answer
Yeah.
and to have that introspection to not only have the answer, but to question your assumptions and identify different paths that you might take. So yeah, thanks for that.
For those interested in your consultancy and the tremendous value you provide, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you or to learn?
Thanks. So yeah, my business practice, it's Clear Path Communications, focused on organization development consulting, including change management work, organization design, and then leadership coaching practice. So yeah, clearpathcommunications.com or Kris, Kris, at clearpathcommunications.com.
Excellent.
well, this was really fun to reconnect and to talk about these things. And I think all three of us and many more magicians have been in search for the rich, enabling, enlivening experience that we had then, partly because we were young and we were all in the trenches together, but it was a special place that you helped to create, and we'll always be thankful for that. So thanks.
Thank you. I believe it had a life of its own, and I was just a shepherd helping to corral. And yeah, it's such a gift to stay connected and be connected. And when's the next thing we can talk about so we can do this again?
Thank you for listening to General Magic and the Soul of Tech podcast. Tune into our Substack for more interviews and articles at spellboundproductions.substack.com.